When I was getting started, I was 6 figures in debt in college. I was driving Uber full time. I had all these other bills to pay. Like, I felt like there was no other option. My back was against the wall. I had to make it work. So I don't know what it is, but I do think it is a rite of passage. I think it's something you're inevitably gonna hit. And when it does happen, it's just recognizing and being aware like, oh, whoa, whoa, this is burnout. Maybe I should take a step back and breathe.
Super excited to chat today with Bobby Hobert. He started podcasting in 2016 with Purpose in the Youth. And before he was a full-time content creator, he was a full-time Uber driver. One of the best in the world, actually.
The best.
Top 2%. Today, he's the host of the It's the Bearded Man podcast, a podcast sharing the stories of people in pursuit of their dreams. And he's all about helping people reach their fullest potential. How are you doing today, Bobby?
I'm doing great. I love that you knew the 2% thing, because I used to literally run with that so heavy when I was still driving Uber. And even to this day, when I talk to people about like that past life of driving Uber, I always bring up like, yeah, I was a top 2% driver. And people are like, no, you weren't. And I'm like, I literally have a documentation and a sticker to prove to you. But super excited to be here today, man. And I appreciate you having me on the show today.
Awesome. I love it. Before we dive into podcasting specifically, I have to ask, because like I know for myself, I've had a lot of pretty intimate conversations with Uber drivers, when you got like two strangers in a car together for like 30, 40, 50 minutes sometimes in LA, like things can get pretty deep pretty quick. So I'm really curious to hear if there was ever like a certain conversation or moment with a passenger that kind of shifted your perspective and kind of let you know that like, hey, I'm on the right track with this content stuff.
Oh, that is a loaded question. We could spend the next 45 minutes just talking about that in of itself, because to me, driving Uber was literally mini podcasts all day long with strangers. And there were so many high level conversations and also low level where like you're meeting top executives of Netflix and all these different companies. And then you're also meeting people that are just honestly just trying to get by. The one moment that really opened my eyes, and it wasn't even on the right track of I'm headed down the right path. But it was a moment of realization of like, a check to myself where I had to realize like it could always be worse. I'll never forget. It was like a middle of the week, like at 3:00 in the afternoon, like on a Wednesday, and I picked up a woman and she was bawling her eyes out. And I was just like, okay, what is happening right now? And she kind of just got in my Uber and she told me that she was, I think, in her early 20s. She just found out she was pregnant. Her boyfriend was not happy that she found that she was pregnant. Her parents were starting to like yell at her and scream at her. And she like, I was driving her to her friend's house. And it was in that brief moment where I was just like, I'm caught up in my own life. Me, the bearded man, trying to build a brand, trying to build a podcast, moved out from Boston. Now I'm living in LA, chasing the dream. And I'm just like, damn, like all my little issues of like not getting enough downloads, not getting the guests on my show, this doesn't mean shit to what this woman is going through right now. And so I think that is the immediate moment that kind of pops in my head when you bring up like those Uber days, because that was like a very one of the many, many rides that some way, some shape impacted me. There were rides that made me feel good about myself, and I was heading down the right path. And there were other moments like that where it was kind of reflective. But man, just literally a podcast every single ride, because every person has a story to tell, and when you're their Uber driver, they feel like you're their therapist for the next 15, 30, 45 minutes.
I love that. That's heavy though, man. That's crazy.
There's a lot of some heavy stuff that kind of was talked about in that Uber, and it's crazy to think back on it. I'm just about to hit 2 years of not driving Uber full time this month, and it feels like it was just yesterday I was driving, but I feel very good that chapter has closed, and I'm on to different things now at this point.
Would you say you've always been an extrovert? I'm always curious, because like when people are Uber drivers, I feel like it is like every single minute you're just sharpening your conversational skills if you're doing it right, unless if you're the guy that just like doesn't say anything.
Yeah, there are some drivers where I'll get into cars and I'm like, damn, he's not even gonna like ask me how my day's going. I'm like, all right, bet I get it. I've been there. I think I've always been an extrovert, and I think that was one realization I had when I was stepping into the podcast phase. Before I even bought a mic, before I even got into it, I recognized like, what does it take to become a podcaster? You need to be a people's person. And I knew just on my track record of my life that I was a people's person. I knew looking at my father and kind of the way he was with his brothers and how he was an extrovert too. And so I knew that was one of my core strengths. And that kind of gave me the green light of like, if podcasting is a space you want to go into, well, you need to be a people's person. You need to be an extrovert. I'm definitely that. And then that's why it also worked when I started driving Uber full time, because I was like, I like people. I'm driving. Yeah. I don't mind driving. I'm in control of my time. Like, this seems like the best bet. So why not go for it?
And when you were starting out, I think we read this on your about page. You said you were funding your first podcast through the Uber driving, and that you would like drive at night and podcast and look for guests during the day. Why did you want to start a show in the first place?
Yeah, podcaster by day, Uber driver by night. That was my my slogan. Imagine going into a top business school. I went to a school called Bentley University, and I thought like that was like the route that I was supposed to go, and I was going to graduate and, you know, get a corporate job and follow that trajectory, which is nothing wrong if that makes you happy. But it was a realization moment when I was graduating, when I realized like through an internship that was not what I wanted to do. And so for me, going into my spring semester, my senior year of college, I started listening to a podcast called like The School of Greatness by Lewis Howes. I was starting to pay attention to like Gary Vee. Another guy by the name of Drama, Chris, I think his last name is Path.
Yeah.
I had watched him growing up on MTV's Robin Big and Fantasy Factory. He was launching his own podcast called Short Story Long. And I was just kind of see like this new space of like podcasting starting and really starting to grow. And because I was graduating business school, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, I was like, well, maybe I should start interviewing people to figure out what is my passion, what is my purpose, what I want to do with my life after school. And so the one thing that I took from business school that they taught us was business is about surveying the market, looking at what is missing in the space. And then that's what you do. You create something that delivers that value. And I noticed that there was not a podcast on young, passionate people in the pursuit of following their passions. There was all these success stories of people that, you know, are in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s. And it's very hard to relate to that when you're 22 years young. So it was like a green light moment of like, well, I know I'm a people's person. I really like this podcast space. Maybe I should just create the thing that I've been looking for. And then August 31st of 2016, I launched the first episode and hit the ground running after that.
That's crazy. Pushing 6 years of podcasting.
Yeah, I feel like I'm barely just scratching the surface too. I've really try to get better. I'm very self-critical, and I still feel like there's so much room to grow as a podcaster. And even to this day, like every week over week, I'm still tweaking and trying to find ways to become a better podcaster and how to be more present in the podcast and not, you know, manufacture all the questions ahead of time and be more kind of curious in the moment. And yeah, I mean, 5 years has just gone by like that, but very excited for just what has yet to come and what the future might look like.
So why did you end up stopping Purpose in the Youth and starting It's the Bearded Man? Like what's the difference and where are you hoping to take it over the next few years?
It was weird. It was very interesting timing where I was just over 3 years of doing Purpose in the Youth consistently, weekly content, driving by, you know, Uber driver at night, podcasting during the day. And honestly, I was just starting to feel burnt out. I was hitting a wall. I was already starting to I actually had a conversation with a couple of people, and it was the realizations that I was having was, one, this Uber driving thing needed to kind of end. I needed to start putting myself in a position where I could learn and enhance my skills, maybe not directly through podcast producing, but there's got to be something else out there that I could do that would help me develop stronger as a person, as a creative. So I was already implementing a pause process where I finished recording the last couple podcasts I had lined up. And that was about I had 3 to 4 weeks left of podcasts to roll out. And at the same time, I was like, all right, I need to get out of driving Uber. I need to find the next career. And so as I'm putting the show on pause, I end up getting this amazing career opportunity with a company called Liquid IV. I got it through a podcast guest that I had interviewed a year before, the founder. So I put the show on pause and start working for this company full time. A couple months goes by. Now this is in October of 2019. It starts to become January of 2020. start to get this itch to get back into the podcast space, but I wasn't ready to start interviewing people again. I still felt burnt out. And so through those 3 years of doing Purpose in the Youth, really, I was trying to find my passion. I was trying to find my purpose, and I had found it, which was me being an entertainer, a podcaster. I had found my brand, like the bearded man, Bobbbaaaay, all that stuff wasn't really dialed in when I started Purpose in the Youth. I was just Bobby Hobert, the host of Purpose in the Youth. Like I didn't really know what my brand, my personal brand was looking like. And through those years, I really figured it out. And so really, It's the Bearded Man podcast was born while Purpose in the Youth was really technically on pause. And I started the first 10 episodes the first 12 episodes is just solo podcasts of me talking about my life and things that were happening and all this change and going from the Uber driver to a full-time career and all the lessons I had learned through podcasting. And so at some point I was like, I love podcasting though. I love talking. I love sharing my thoughts with the world. And so I then made the realization where I was like, maybe Purpose in the Youth served its purpose. I found who I was. I found my passion. I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. And so instead of rebranding the show, instead of, kind of tweaking everything and just carrying on that project, I wanted to close the chapter. I didn't want to ever disrupt what a beautiful project it had become. And I also knew that this new show was going to take a different direction. It was going to have solo podcasts. It was going to bring guests on, but it wasn't going to be storytelling like that first show was. So I just decided, like, at some point during the early It's the Bearded Man stages, which really I didn't hit the ground running. It was like a bi-weekly monthly podcast for the first 6 months. And then in July of 2020, I had a moment where I was like, I'm going all in. And I finally made the announcement, Purpose in the Youth. It's closing its door. We did, 3.5 years of great content. Thank you so much for the support. But if you want to continue following me, follow It's the Bearded Man. It's going to be some high quality podcast content. You don't want to miss it. And ever since then, we've hit the ground running, and it was the right decision. But at the time, Bradley, it felt very nerve-wracking because you're just like, am I closing the chapter on everything that I've put my heart, blood, sweat, tears, soul into this project? Am I just leaving this behind? And I didn't. It really propelled me to have the confidence to take all the learnings that I had in that show and go full speed ahead with It's the Bearded Man.
I love that. It's almost like a archive of your evolution, like as a person almost. And it's like if people are really interested in you, they can like see the arc in real time as the show progresses. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's cool too for some of the guests that I was able to get on who have done really well since we chatted then. I think it's really cool to be able to go back and see like where not only my story along the way, but some of these guests who I've been able to do a second and third time interview with, just to like see where they were in their life and to where they are now. It's been really cool to kind of document some of these high level people, where their thoughts were, where their mindsets were at, and then where they are today. And I think it was a big win-win for both myself and the guests, and then really the listener who's been able to hopefully follow along since the beginning of that journey.
Something you mentioned a minute ago that I want to dive deeper into is this idea of burnout. And I know we're both personal development addicts, and I'm excited to dive into it. But I feel like it's something that a lot of people struggle with when they start out on their content creation journey, because it can be a lot to take in, whether it's cameras, microphones, editing software, workflows, shortcut, like everything. It can be overwhelming. So I want to ask, like, where do you think your burnout came from, and how did you overcome it?
Burnout, I unfortunately feel like it is something that maybe the listener or somebody that hears this is different, and bless your soul if you are. But the reason I think burnout comes is because, or at least why it came in my life, was have this idea, start a podcast, have all these visions and ideas, and I need to execute on it. And so for me in the beginning, those first 3 years, there was no such thing as balance. It was full throttle, pedal to the metal. We need to execute. We need to prove to the world and to myself of what I'm capable of. And so I think the reason burnout had came so much in my life in those years was just because I needed to show the world what I was capable of. I wanted to prove to people what I could actually do. And so it's not healthy. I do not allow myself, and I will never allow myself to live that type of lifestyle like I did for those 3 years. There was nothing except driving Uber, podcasting, And anything that was business oriented, that was a networking opportunity, a coffee conversation, something that was going to open a door. There was no such thing as dating. There was no such thing as just going to concerts. There was no such thing as actually living my life in LA. It just did not exist. And so I just think that really burnout comes from people trying to prove what they're capable of and bring these visions to life. And so I wish I could say that it's not going to happen for somebody that listens, but it probably will. And you just have to recognize it. And you have to, when you see it coming and you feel like, I just feel drained mentally, physically, like let off the gas, like getting a good night's sleep, that 2 extra hours of sleep is actually going to pay off for the next 24 hours versus you sacrificing the 2 hours because you think you're being more productive. It doesn't actually help. But it's tough when when I started, I really started at zero. Like I didn't have any vlog experience. I didn't really know how to work a camera. I didn't know how to work a mic. Like this was a whole new world to me. I am very lucky though that I had a buddy of mine that I grew up with who was an artist. He taught me audio engineering 101.
Nice.
I had friends around me that knew the camera equipment. They taught me camera equipment 101. So I was very lucky that I was able to lean into certain people to like at least get the cement structure understood. But at some point, even once you understand everything, like I'm sure even with your own experience of podcasting, like once you start getting the things in place and it's time to go, you just want to go and you just want to produce and you just want to execute. And who's to say, maybe you can produce 5 podcasts a week. I'm not going to tell you not to, but I know my own limits now. I know what is doable. In any moment that I see and feel like, whoa, we're starting to touch the burnout.
Yeah.
I just dip. I get out and I feel very fortunate because I'm not in a place in my life where I have to hit that burnout anymore, which, like I said, I think everybody goes through it at some point.
Do you think it's a rite of passage though? Like it almost feels like you have to put in the short-term sacrifice for the long-term momentum.
I wish burnout upon nobody, but I've never heard a success story of somebody who has never dealt with burnout.
Right.
So unfortunately, I think it is a rite of passage. If you can navigate it and not feel that pressure, I tip my hat to you. I just don't know how possible it is. Like when I was getting started, I was 6 figures in debt in college. I was driving Uber full time. I had all these other bills to pay. I felt like there was no other option. My back was against the wall. I had to make it work. So I don't know what it is, but if you're in a position where you're not going to hit that burnout, like please, more power to you. But I do think it is a rite of passage. I think it's something you're inevitably going to hit. And when it does happen, it's just recognizing and being aware like, oh, whoa, this is burnout. Maybe I should avoid this. Maybe I should take a step back and breathe. Or maybe I should make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, 100%. I also want to add to this too that one of our shows had a psychologist on. I'm trying to think if it was Dr. Nicole LaPera, but someone said that there's a difference between burnout and stress, and like learning to identify it is key because I think she said that stress is when you want 2 impossible things at the same time. So it's like you want to build a podcast, build a business, do whatever, but you also want like work-life balance and to like take several days off. Impossible. Like it's literally not going to happen. You're just going to freak yourself out and overwhelm yourself like trying to want 2 impossible things at the same time. But if you tell yourself, hey, I'm going to go hard on the podcast this month. I'm going to record 30 episodes, but next month I'm going to chill for a couple weeks. Then you're just shuffling around that. Like then it's not about like burnout necessarily. Maybe it's just like short-term stress that you're taking on for more of like a longer term pleasure. But I think it's important that like, yeah, it's going to suck in the beginning, but you got to build up that momentum to get the train moving.
Yeah. That's a good, I don't even know how, if you had flipped the script and said, what's the difference between stress and burnout? That's actually a really tough thing to decipher because I don't know. I actually don't know how to really put in like I have good stress every day where I'm thinking about where am I going? How do I get to point B? What are these different things? But I think the difference is I have a switch where I allow the stress to be on during the day where I'm like thinking big picture, trying to understand how do we get there? What are the decisions I need to make right now? And I think the burnout is when you're not allowing yourself to have that switch. So like usually around 5, 6 o'clock every day, that stress switch is off, done. Shut it down. relax. Like you're not thinking about work anymore. It's not worth it because you're just going to make yourself feel worse because you know that you physically and mentally are not there to create right now. So just stop thinking about it. Whereas I think the burnout is you just constantly keep that switch on. You're like, gotta keep working. It's 9:00 at night. Like it inevitably is going to catch up to you at some point.
Let's shift gears a little bit to the Bearded Man podcast. What would you say is your biggest podcast achievement with that show so far?
Holding myself accountable to consistently show up. That is in of itself, and I know you know this being in the podcast space, that in of itself is the hardest part about podcasting. If you can show up, like getting DMs or messages about how content has impacted people, that is literally like pouring gasoline onto the fire. Like you're only getting me to keep wanting to keep doing this. But at the baseline, in order to get anywhere within the podcast space, you have to stay consistent. And so I had kind of mentioned maybe about 5-10 minutes ago, in July of 2020, I had a moment where I said, I know exactly what I want to do. For the first 6 months of It's the Bearded Man podcast, it was bi-weekly, maybe once a month. There was maybe 12 episodes out in the first 6 months. It was just kind of me just going with the flow. And I refused to tell people a schedule of when I'm posting because I didn't want to put that pressure on myself. I just wanted to drop content when I had something to say. And so in July of 2020, I just had the moment where I said, you know what? Enough is enough. I want to put out 2 podcasts a week. I want 1 solo and I want 1 guest. And ever since then, other than intentionally taking like breaks because I was back home visiting family and anything like that, I've consistently put out 2 podcasts a week.
Nice.
Over the last, 15 months. And so I think that in of itself is just something that I hold myself accountable to. And I'm really proud of being able to navigate that path of like making sure there's always something ready to go, which as I know, is not always easy to do.
Consistency is really the key to everything, man. Like whether it's like work or investing, exercise, it's like, it isn't about trying to create the best thing. It's about just taking little baby steps every day. I think Will Smith says like lay 1 brick at a time as perfectly as you can, and then you'll have a wall.
Boom. That's what I love about podcasting though, is because it doesn't allow you, if you really want to go all in on it, right? There is no room for you to overthink and for you to really try to perfect it. You understand that at some point you got to hit publish. Like you don't have 6 months to work on one concept. It is literally usually 6 days and you need to produce. So I think that's kind of the beauty of the pressure of the podcast world, which has then allowed me to translate it into anything else that I do creatively, whether it's newsletters, whether it's YouTube videos. Like yes, there is obviously a very clear difference between vlogs and like you can hear it and see it in the editing and the production. Yes, I get that. But to a certain extent, the podcast space forces you to produce, which inevitably is going to make you a better podcaster. Like it is never going to be perfect. There's always going to be more work to be done. I don't know who said it, but there's been like quotes that I've heard out there where it's like, get it 80% there and you're good to go. Like I feel, I definitely feel like I'm 80% where I need to be for every podcast I publish. But I damn well know, like, had I had an extra week, well, I probably would have had more facts in it and I would have tweaked things. But at some point, you just have to go and you just have to keep producing. And that's what I love about the podcast space. There is no time to really overthink. You just have to go and, see where you end up after that, I guess.
Well, let's talk about what goes into a show. You said you're publishing twice a week, so interviews and solos. Let's talk about how you do the solos. How do you go about like selecting a topic and preparing a script, or do you even use a script?
Oh yeah, script all the way, baby. It's so funny. Like the difference between a solo pod and a guest pod is just like solo is extremely word for word verbatim scripted, where the guest podcast is just going with the flow. There's prep work done, trying to understand, what are the topics ahead of time, and then kind of just feeling it from there. But to me, the solo pods really are just trying to pay attention of what am I feeling right now. Like that has been the key to me producing really passionate, going all in, giving it my all solo topics, because if it's not something I'm motivated to talk about right now, you're going to hear it and you're going to see it and feel it in the script. So I've kind of just tried to keep a running list of like potential topics I think would be good for the show, but also just like recognizing what's happening in my life real time. Like the solo pod I recorded yesterday was about the importance of traveling to new cities. And the coincidence that's the topic is because this weekend I went to Denver, Colorado. And so a lot of the topics end up just being in real time from moments that are happening in my life. And so there have been a lot of different things, whether it's productivity, whether it's dating, whether it is well-being, whether it is morning routines. I am just trying to share insight on topics to help truly people become a better version of themselves. Do I have all the answers? Do I think I'm right? No, not at all. But I'm just speaking in real time what I'm learning in the hopes that it really does help somebody out there that listens to it.
I love that. What's been your favorite piece of feedback you've gotten on the solo episodes? Because solo episodes are rough, man. Like it's just you and a microphone.
I love it. I call it my therapy session. I love it.
But it can be tough for a lot of people because they don't know what to say. The audience doesn't really engage them. They don't really know what's going on. But you had mentioned at the top of the show that like your community is really engaged. So I'm just curious to know how they've like helped shape the show, but also how they've helped keep you going as the host.
Yeah, I think what really fires me up is when I hear a solo topic really resonate with somebody or is what they needed to hear. Because then I'm like, wow, these topics are actually helping. Like this is actually working for people. The hardest podcast script for me to write and actually record, and that's the reason I did it, because I knew if this is scaring me, I need to lean into this and do it. And I think it, this day, is the most feedback I've ever gotten from a solo podcast. Was I had wrote a script on literally unintentionally going celibate for like 3 years straight. And for people that are listening to know what celibate means, that literally means just not hooking up with another person. And so I was shit scared writing the script because I'm like, I'm literally opening up my inner truths and what honestly was mentally a darkness in my mind, because you trip yourself up into believing it's me. What is wrong with me? Woe is me. It's like all this shit that just doesn't help you as a person. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm going to put this in a podcast. I'm going to see what happens. And to this day, without a doubt, it is the most feedback I've ever gotten from a podcast. And what was really, really insightful is I definitely have a more male skewing podcast, but the amount of women that I was getting hit up on about this podcast was mind blowing to me. So it then gave me the green light to say, not only are these solo podcasts working, but the stuff that is really hard to talk about is the stuff that people want to hear. That's why like a Call Her Daddy podcast does so well, because Alex Cooper is talking about the raunchiest shit that happens inside the bedroom that nobody has ever wanted to talk about or thought they could talk about. And so all that to say, that's what works, is talking about things that are relatable and that other people want to talk about, but maybe have not had the courage to speak up and tell people how they were feeling. And ever since that moment, it's not like there are those types of podcasts. Those solo pods don't happen every week. Okay. I'm not like looking for the deepest, darkest secret in my life to just like go on a tangent about because I want people to love it and share it out. But it's when those episodes happen and I'm like, ooh, that could be a good episode, but like, damn, that's going to be interesting to talk about. That's when I go, you're talking about it. You got to show up and you got to do it.
That's amazing, man. I really appreciate your vulnerability.
I recognize that from the jump. You want to be a top level podcaster in the world, you have to be willing to be your most authentic, vulnerable self. People want to connect with real people, and that's the only way to do it. If you are hesitant, I think it grows, right? I wasn't talking about subjects like this when I first started 5 years ago. So I think the consistency of doing a podcasting a lot allows you to be more confident. But to a certain extent, like if you want to excel in the space, you're going to slowly but surely have to find ways to be your most authentic self and be vulnerable to talk about things that maybe other people want to hear you talk about.
That's awesome. Let's shift gears a little bit into the technical. We've talked about the mindset. Let's talk about how you're actually recording your episodes. So what kind of microphone are you using? What kind of camera? What does it look like behind the scenes?
Yeah, right now, so on what we're recording with, I'm using a Shure. This is the same Shure that Joe Rogan, every podcaster, Call Her Daddy, Shure. I think it's SMB.
SM7B, yeah.
Yeah. I see. I'm not even a technical guy. I don't even know half the shit that I'm using. I just know it works. So I use a Shure. When it comes to camera, when I used to do Purpose in the Youth back in the day, it was like an in-studio production. I was using a GoPro. Now I just use the webcam that is built into the Mac. Funny enough, I was doing just solely audio for It's the Bearded Man up until about 2 months ago. And then I started incorporating webcam. So that's been a game changer. And then for interface wise, I use a Focusrite. That works really well. I've been recording on a platform called Zencastr, which allows you to do it via remote. That's been really helpful. And then anytime that I haven't used Zencastr, I use a program called Ableton. It's very streamlined. I'm not, getting in there and, changing every single wave to make it sound perfect. I honestly, for the first 4.5, call 5 years, make numbers easy, I was self-producing the entire show by myself. And then recently, about 2 months ago, actually at the top of September, I actually hired an editor who now I send all the raw assets, all the raw content to, and then they send me the final assets, which just allows me to focus on bigger picture, where we're going, and all the higher level type of things.
I have to say, like the webcam that you're using, even if it is just the stock one, like looks really good.
It works great. I also need to call that I have a $20 ring light that I got from Amazon above, because I think what I've learned with camera is lighting is really important. You can have the best camera in the world, but the lighting is shit. Your camera's not going to work great. So I think if you can have really good lighting and a decent camera, which, like I said, I'm using a webcam that's built into the Mac, you can definitely make it work.
Nice. Okay, so we've scripted, recorded, edited an episode. What are you doing to promote the show?
Promoting isn't a ton. Like, it's not. I mean, I wish there was like a whole nother. I wish I had a team of people just like putting in every single platform possible. I think recently it kind of has shifted a little bit where I have an IG story asset, I have an IG feed asset. Similarly for solo, I do it for the guests. If I'll create content for the guest podcast. I recently hired another editor who's taking sound bites from my solo podcast and is creating TikTok / IG reel content, which is like incorporating more stock footage than myself, which has been really cool to help storytell through stock footage, which I think does well for TikTok and reel. And other than that, I put a real strong call out in all the solo and guest pods of like, if you enjoy this episode at any moment in time, please, all that I ask, screenshot this episode on whatever platform you are listening in on, post it to your IG story, tag me at Bobbbaaaay, post it to your IG story. Let me know what was the biggest takeaway, what was the perspective that you learned. Literally, I'm like verbatim. This is the same thing I say every single time, because I recognize that the best way to grow is word of mouth. You are going to, and that's not just in podcasting, that's life, right? Like,
yes.
If a homie of yours comes up to you and says, yo, you got to check out this new brand, they have incredible hats, you're gonna be like, yeah, I'm going to check it out right now. But if you get an ad served on your feed, you just keep scrolling. So I recognize a very important piece to growth is organic growth. And the best way that I found that can help to work and do that is having people share out their podcast, the podcast on their IG story, tagging me, so that if one of their friends is clicking through and has no idea who I am and they leave a comment saying like, this was such a great episode, if they're a listener of podcast, they may be intrigued to want to check it out. So I think that's really the most important piece. And other than that, it's just posting social assets to hope that drives to the actual episode.
Have you ever experimented with like letting listeners either like call in or ask questions or stuff like that?
I used to do this with Purpose and Youth. Every guest pod, I would post like a questionnaire of like, what questions want me to ask this guest when they come on the show? And I would pick maybe 1 to 3. And I would do that religiously. With It's the Bearded Man, I really haven't done that for the guest podcast until I posted a story yesterday of a guest that I have coming on the show again. But more so when I do the solo pods, every single episode, I will post an IG story saying like, I'm recording a podcast on traveling to new cities. What topics or questions do you have? And so I'll post that. I love that I'm in a place where I record on my own time, and like the idea of a call-in, like having to set up a certain time or calling people, like it's too much logistics that I just don't have the energy to figure out. But I think just having people submit questions has been really helpful. And then it's great to see that like when people hear the episode and they hear their question, they DM me like, yo, that was awesome. Really appreciate it. And they love it. So I definitely think there's a really important aspect of getting listeners involved in what you're doing. And I would love to some way down the line, like literally do like a webcam, like bring them in for, their 5 minutes, ask the question, and then bring in the next person at some point.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because we just started a new format for our show. It's like a round table with like our like me and our head of creative, our head editor, and we're all just kind of like answering people's podcasting questions. And we're setting up this this tool called SpeakPipe. So you can like embed it on a landing page, and it's almost like a voice memo, like on your phone. So people can like you can CTA people to go visit the landing page, like it's thebeardedman.com/questions, and they basically see this like voice memo thing. They can hit it and then ask their question, and it'll like forward it as an email to you. And then you got like the MP3 of it. And I think it'd be really interesting. I'm trying to figure out how we can make
smart
podcasting more engaging for the listeners. Because we've been doing like news episodes, and a cool article from The Verge was like the next big thing in podcasting is speaking back. And it's like all of these different tools and ways that these apps are planning to allow podcasters to engage their audiences directly. Because, like the biggest issue is a lot of people start shows and it just feels like you're talking into a black box and like no one's talking back. And it's like you go on for even years sometimes before people really consistently start reaching out and letting you know what the show means to you. So I think like finding ways to get more people involved would be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's without a doubt something that's on my radar of not even getting more people involved, but how do you bring a like-minded group of listeners into a place where they can all communicate with one another? So it's very much on my radar of like not only getting people more involved, but like creating a space for similar like-minded people to communicate with one another. Because if you're a listener of my podcast, your podcast, any other podcast, you don't know, there's no way to find other listeners that listen to that podcast unless somebody creates a Facebook group that is possible. Or if you go on to like, if the podcast has its own Instagram account, you could kind of go through the followers and find people. But I think another big thing is going to be finding ways to bring like-minded people together. And you're seeing it with some of the top podcasts where they're doing live podcasts. But there's definitely a lot of things that are going to be happening in the next coming months and years of creating these spaces, or like you're doing with having people submit a voice memo. I think it's absolutely genius.
Let's say you had to start over. Well, you already kind of did this. I was about to ask, like, if you were to start over again today, what would you do differently? But I guess you've already sort of done that with It's a Bearded Man. But if you were to start over yet again, what do you think you would do differently with a new show?
Now, knowing what I know now, I should have started outsourcing a long time ago. It would have created more space for me to really figure out what I wanted to do. Like, it would just allow more space for me to think bigger picture. And surprisingly enough, I think even when you're getting started, and I was able to do this with a camera guy by the name of Kirk Cedric. Shout out to you, Kirk, if you ever hear this somehow, some way. But he was like my D-Rock of Gary Vee for the last 2 years of Purpose Needed. He was shooting all my BTS. He was shooting every vlog, and he was literally making nothing, and because he believed in the vision. And so I should have looked out to outsource an editor long ago, because I could have easily found somebody that believed in my vision. And it's not me taking advantage of them. It's them bringing them in on a vision together. And I should have done that earlier, which would have allowed me to have more space to think about where I was going and focus on bigger things, and would have gave somebody an incredible opportunity. I was just scared because I felt like I need to do it. I know what's right. I know the titling of the podcast. And so if I had to restart again, immediately from episode 1, it would be completely outsourced, and it would allow me to really just focus on what is the thing I like to do, which is recording podcasts, and then putting people in place that are experts in all these other aspects and allow them to do their thing.
For people listening that are more in the beginning stages, when you say like delegate so you can focus on higher value stuff, what has been the biggest shift that you've made, like extracting yourself from production and really doubling down on like hosting and getting guests and content and all of that? Kind of what does that look like from a practical angle? What are the steps people should take?
It's really on you and how you want to spend that extra time. Like me outsourcing the editing and that type of stuff, it probably saves me anywhere between 3 to 5 hours a week, which may not seem like a lot. You times that by a month, times that by 6 months, a year, it adds up to a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I can't say that really there has been a specific thing that like now that I have 3 to 5 hours more, I'm doing X. I think it's kind of spread out where it's like, now I'm spending 30 more minutes creating TikToks. Now I'm spending 30 more minutes looking for podcast guests. Now I'm spending 30 more minutes like consuming content to understand like what's working, what's not working for other people. So it's hard for me to say what have I actually allocated that other time towards, but I will say it's allowed me to continue to have that balance so that at 5, 6 o'clock every day, I'm not worried about, I still got to edit this podcast. I still got to like do all this other stuff to make it look and sound clean. I can then shut down the computer, be happy with what I've gotten done today, and then get rest so I can get back to it tomorrow. So it's hard for me to say if there's a specific thing. I think it's just allowed me to really go all in on the things that I know is working or areas that I need to put more effort into, and then be able to have that space where I go, okay, time to slow down, time to relax, time to breathe, get more excited to get back to it tomorrow.
I love that. That's awesome. Love to close out every show by asking everyone who their moonshot guest is and why. Who would you love to have on the show?
So many people.
Top 2.
Ooh. Jay Shetty's number 1 right now. There's 2 people in mind for number 2. It'd be either Lewis Howes or Joe Rogan. I got to give credit to Lewis Howes because if it wasn't for his podcast, I don't know if I ever would have got into the space. Gary Vee's on the list very shortly after, but I just see like Lewis Howes and Jay Shetty together, like side by side, are like, they are doing everything at a very high level, but it's something about that I've really gravitated towards Jay with his energy, like, and just his presence is just something that I am very attracted towards and like want to become. So I think they're both within reason of happening. I will say I haven't put so much effort into making either of those guests happen because I weirdly, it's kind of like what Gary, you a big Gary Vee fan?
Oh yeah. Almost built his studio back in the day.
Oh, I love that. He talks about, and I don't pay attention as much to him as I did in 2016, 2017, and then pretty much 2018. But he always talked about how the happiest day of his life, but also the scariest day of his life is going to be the day he buys the Jets because he's going to get to the end goal of what he's always wanted in his life.
Yeah.
But then he also recognizes that he's at the peak of the mountain. Where does he go from here? I mean, it's guests like Jay Shetty and Lewis Howes where it's like the chase of getting to them is a lot of fun, but it's also scary knowing that it's like once you get there, it's like, what's next? So I think they're all within reason. I think they're all within, they're definitely moonshots, but I've kind of not forced it. And I've taken my shot with both of them and it hasn't happened with either, but I'm also just not going to continue to pursue it if it's not meant to be. I want it to happen. And I want them to be like talking to their rep, like, hey, get me on It's the Bearded Man podcast. I see the show. I'm hearing about it. Like something about this guy, like we got to get on the show. And I want that to happen more so than me begging them to pity, like come on my show, come be a guest, So I say those are my top 2.
I wouldn't say it's begging. The best guest requests are always like a fair exchange of value. It's like you got to catch them when they're promoting a new book. I know Jay's got one in the works.
Totally. No, you're completely right. Who's yours?
Damn it! This is the second time someone asked and I didn't have a good answer.
Let's hear it.
Last time I said Graham Cochran. He's like a audio engineer, music producer dude. I first started out wanting to get into music production and I kind of like gravitated towards his energy when it comes to like the YouTube music teachers, right? Not really like music teacher, but like he teaches like mixing and production and stuff like that. But sort of as he's evolved, he's kind of become like a business coach. And it just like, I've always liked the way he teached. And the way he teaches business too is really, really refreshing as well. But it would be a cop out for me to mention him twice. So let me think, man. I don't know. Like I don't want to say Gary, but Gary would be cool. I
respect that.
Yeah, because there was a moment like way back in the day when he was first building up his podcast studio. I think it might have been in like 2016 actually, and he put out a tweet, and I remember responding to that tweet. And then getting on a phone call with Jason Beauregard at the time and like spending 2 hours on the phone with this guy, like figuring out his studio and then like seeing it come to life And I never got that opportunity to move from like Indiana to New York and run it. But, you know, it really helped validate like, hey, I'm onto something with this like podcasting stuff. And I met him again when I worked at Cast Media in Hollywood. And he was on, damn it, what's his name? The host was like a radio personality dude. And he snagged Gary for like it was supposed to be like a 20-minute interview, like late at night, like 8 p.m. But it ended up going like almost 2 hours.
Wow.
And I remember I was just like, wow, everything kind of like came full circle. Cause like for the longest time, he's kind of like my hero, and to like meet him in person was nuts. But I couldn't bring myself to say like, hey, thank you. Like, even though I may not have ever gotten the chance to work with you, when I responded to your tweet, like way back in the day, talked to Jason and went over all of the stuff, it kind of lit the fire under my ass of like, I'm onto something. I need to keep going. And like, I respect that. I respect you. And like, thank you. So I would really love to talk to Gary and just be like, hey man, what's up? Why didn't you hire me back in the day?
Why did you hire me, Gary? Come on now. Yeah, there's something about him, man. Gary's he's a special guy, and he definitely has been a very important piece as to why I am where I am today. So there's nothing but respect and love for him.
Well, thank you so much, Bobby. This was great, man.
You're great, brother. Appreciate being on the show.
Where can people find out more about you and check out the show, follow you online?
Oh boy, they want to follow the Bearded Man. Across all socials, just at Bobbbaaaay. That's B-O, 3 B's, 4 A's, and a Y. It's the Bearded Man on all podcast platforms, or it's thebeardedman.com. I think those alone, you'll probably be able to find me just through that alone. But I will ask for a favor. If they enjoyed this episode, you need to go leave a review on Bradley's podcast feed right now, because that shit helps, and I know it does. So leave him 5 stars. Either leave him a one-word review, or leave a full sentence. But if you are listening to this podcast, you need to leave a review on the iTunes podcast app, because that shit helps, and I know it does. So please do this man a favor and give him some love.
Awesome. Thank you. And check out It's the Bearded Man.
Let's go, baby.
See you, man.
See you.